semnol kake mo faseda.
Welcome to Talking in Stations, podcast about EVE Online. I'm your host, Matterall, and joining me today is Carneros.
Good morning, everyone.
We have Ashtarothi.
Yes. Greetings, fellow Imperians. I am Ashtarothi, and I am cloaked at the moment, so you can't.
I always love that. So we're going to cover a bunch of things today. One is the major changes that are coming in the Onslaught expansion, and that'll be starting this Tuesday. So we'll do a talk about the preview and some of the stuff that's coming, and maybe some of the repercussions that people will feel. So we have some guests to help us with that. We're also going to be talking about, I think it's called the Quiet War, or something that's going on in the Scalding Pass area. And so we've got the head of, I don't know if it's head of Winter Coalition, but definitely the head of Fraternity.
Hey.
Naros, how are you?
Yep, thank you. Chinese warlord here.
Well, we're going to come back and have you talk about yourself a little bit. First, let me get everybody else introduced, and then we'll start with you. But I also want to say hi this morning to Dunk Dinkle, who's on screen with us with a crazy blue suit.
Hello, I'm Dunk Dinkle with Brave Newbies. Who do you fly with?
Also from, actually, Fweddit, right? Is that right, Exxon fan?
Although we just formed our new alliance, Free Range Chicken.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah, we'll be in the alliance at like 02:15 tonight.
Mazel tov.
Okay, that's news. So that's Exxon Fang from Fweddit. Fweddit was originally in, Faction War. Faction War, right?
Yep,
Yeah,
we used to be I Whip My Slaves back and forth doing Amar Minmatar Faction War. Then we moved into Init, where I was the lead diplomat for a little bit, and then we left in the last month to go do our own thing in Declan and Devoid.
Right, and you found your new home with who again?
We were with RC, but we're actually going to be moving here shortly, doing something with some other allies. We're not ready to announce that just quite yet, but in a couple of days we will be.
Before the show ends, we'll know.
Potentially.
All right, and last but not least, of course, you'll see on screen is Brisk Grubal, CSM member. How are you doing, Brisk?
Alma, thank you for having me on today.
Well, let's see how you defend yourself today, because you've been at this for a while now with all the changes and the stuff that people are saying. All right.
That we have.
All right. So that's our introductions. Let's move on to Naros. How are you doing? It's a pleasure to meet you. I've tried to get you on the show a few times, so we're really thankful that you showed up. I think I met you in Las Vegas. Can you tell us about yourself and how you got started with the EVE?
I started probably 9 years ago as a Nullsecer, and then tried multiple things, being in multiple corps, and ended up the Chinese bros need. And when I talked with Wind Spirit, he had some real life things to do, so I took over Fraternity as an acting CEO, and I still am, but I'm also leading the Winter Coalition. Now we live in Dalarit, like the southeast part of the map.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, pretty much.
So you were, do you live in China or do you live in the United States?
I live in the United States, but right now I'm on a business trip in China.
Oh, well, thanks for joining us from China.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were a player for a long time in Nullsec. Then you said your Chinese bros needed you, and Wind Spirits. Who was Wind Spirits to you?
Wind Spirits was the fund of Fraternity, and its pre-existing alliance, that's Pangu. And they set up this alliance about 5 years ago. And after up and downs, all the dramas, and we had our very moment of glory. Now we just drilling inside that. try to be neutral, but still getting content out of it.
Right. So you're slugging it out now in Detroit. What are you up to there? Like, it seems like you are attacking a different group, right?
Yeah, we are attacking Scalding Pass right now because after we signed the NIP with the Legacy, there isn't really a neutral neighbor that we can shoot because Triumvirate is blue. Only we have John region. They don't have much PvP counterpart to speak about, except for Scare Yourself, but they are in EU time zone or somewhere in US time zone. So I figured out I could need a relatively near time zone, a natural component. That would be the Russians. So we are fighting Bright Side of Death. They actually live with us in Curse region, maybe longer than us. I remember every time I come to the Curse region, they were already there.
I know that you're trying. So you're fighting Russians basically in Scalding Pass.
Mm-hmm. Not just for the space. Well, I mean, we wouldn't really need more space, but it's a great chance for us to train our PvP, train our FC team, and our line members. There wasn't such infrastructures before. I'm mostly training the EU time zone FCs and the US time zones. There's something that never happened to fraternity before. We never have such time zone coverage.
Oh, that's cool. And so how is this going?
Well, it's the locals are like, they live there forever, and they're really good at kiting and tactics and small cans. So I would say we lost some, we learned a lot, but we also win some. Like yesterday, we killed a 7-1-4 It's one of the two stagers they had, and we actually brought 300 people in that time zone. Maybe over half of them does not speak Chinese at all. So we have another FC, another comms for them specifically.
Oh yeah, so so I've been reading about that, but it's kind of hard to find information because we need which, funny enough, January, one of our crew members has found translators to talk to the Russian guys. We're trying to get one of them on, but it didn't work out. So we wanted to hear from their side what was going on. So it's basically, this is for territory, or this is kind of for just keeping everybody in shape?
Well, just keep everybody in shape because we don't have content, or we don't die as alliance. So we at least have some alliance action together to keep the momentum for every week. We have 1 or 2 fleets every week just for the stager, for the stager iHubs.
Yeah,
it worked out really well so far.
Is there anything different about being the leader of Winter Coalition, the Chinese? Is there a difference in how to keep them participating in the game versus what you think maybe Western, US or English groups need to do?
Yeah, indeed. Well, there's actually a unique chance I don't think any other alliance CEO could ever have. Maybe some of them have a Russian and English, like 2 counterparts together, like a Red Alliance, and maybe Gunsworm. They're also big now. So you basically have 2 different commanding systems. One speaks English and the other speaks Chinese. And they work in different time zones, obviously. And the cultures among them are quite different. And I already start to feel this and actually deal with this maybe half a year ago. So it's still a new thing for me. Managing the Chinese isn't hard. Alone isn't hard because we don't have any competition, and nobody actually can snowball us if we fail some military. In EU and US time zone, well, you are basically a small entity, but people didn't see that. When people saw fraternity, and it's like, oh, well, it's maybe the top 6 alliance in terms of population, but actually we're quite weak in the US time zone and EU time zone. We're still working on it.
Do you have your own time zone where you're strong?
No, we cover. Yeah, obviously, Chinese time zone is the strongest one. I'd say our weakest time zone might be EU, because most of our groups are from US. I know a lot of people from US. I visit them like in person and see if they want to join my alliance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you seeing any with the Serenity server basically down and no deadline for it to come back up? Are you seeing any big changes to involvement of people in Tranquility?
There were a huge immigration flow about a year ago when NetEase announced they're gonna take over Serenity and put the server on suspension for a while. They didn't like tell us how long that would be, but a year ago, you can see Fraternity has growing numbers every day. We maybe take to over 1,000 people over a week.
Wow.
And
yeah, it's
now,
been really awesome. I mean, we get fights all the time.
That's right.
But I was just wondering. I mean, I know that they're supposed to bring Serenity back up at some point soon, and I don't know what that's going to do to the people who moved to
somewhere, maybe the end of this year, I hope. Well, in long term, in short term, we're gonna bleed some numbers to Serenity server, of course. When a server goes back up, I'm pretty sure people will come back to Serenity. In long term, it's gonna increase the numbers of both servers, I hope, because I can sense the overall altitude towards the mobile game. Like NetEase has been using the IP to create on mobile game. People don't like that. But for me, it's a good chance to advertise EVE as a game. Like CCP has never done such thing before, and they could never done what NetEase could do. So in long term, it could be good for us to bring more numbers in both servers.
What do you mean as a MOBA? MOBA?
There will be two mobile games for EVE.
Oh, mobile games. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said MOBA. So mobile games, yeah. So those are big in China?
It's quite huge, I would say.
Yeah.
Billions of currencies going on.
Wow. Yeah, I don't think people imagine EVE as a mobile game. When I saw it, I'm starting to become a believer.
I got a question about that, because this is obviously been a huge controversy throughout the gaming industry for the last couple of weeks, not just because of what CCP did, but because of what Blizzard's follow-up was, which was basically to announce effectively the same thing of what CCP did, but for Diablo. So this has launched this debate into just kind of the general gaming arena, which I keep coming back to this fact that people like to say this is for the Chinese market, this is for the Korean market, these are for these other markets. But generally speaking, people say that because of the fact that they assume it's microtransaction based and all these other things that seem to do well in those other markets. However, I watched this whole thing, the GDC talk about how mobile games have done in the market for the last year, and also having observed the market trends, it seems to be that generally speaking, shorter living mobile games, Candy Crush, Angry Birds, things that can be done in somewhere between 5 to 15 minutes. I think the longest form that has really been adopted is Hearthstone, which has a 10 to 15 minute long matches. So I guess my question is, the market seems to suggest that it won't support longer form, dedicated, long play style games, but yet people are saying that that's the market in the Chinese audience. Is that at all true, or is there something else going on here?
The market in the whole world for games is on mobile. It's not on PCs. That's where the majority of money is going. And the game companies are chasing where that money is. We hardcore PC gamers don't really appreciate that because we aren't the big mobile gamers, but the rest of the world, no matter where you are, not just Asia, but Europe, North America, South America, all over the world, Australia, people even though they're a little backwards, it's mobile gaming is where the vast majority of people play games.
Yep, and the Chinese are the best at it so far. They can make better mobile games than any other country. They're years ahead of America. So it's really, really smart to pair with a partner like NetEase.
Well, again, so I
Oh, hold
understand.
on. Don't take us too far down this rabbit hole, but finish this up, and then we'll let Naros finish. Go ahead.
Who, me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I understand that the mobile market is huge. That's obvious. But the point is that the mobile market has proven time and time again that longer form, quote unquote, more serious or AAA games haven't really done well. And in fact, in that GDC talk I'm talking about, they specifically warn away from those kinds of games. And yet here we have two rather large companies both trying to recreate effectively a PC experience on the mobile. Do they know something that the market doesn't, or are they basically just assuming that if they throw enough money at the problem, they will break into this larger market?
Well, Astaroth, what I would say to that is one of the things that CCP has prided itself on over the years has been trying to be the cutting edge guys. They were in VR before anybody else was. And I think that one of the benefits of the Pearl Abyss acquisition is they have taken a pretty solid stance on moving BDO and those games to the mobile market. So I think this is a bet on the future. I don't think they know anything. I think they're just taking the chance that the potential for longer form games on mobile devices has finally arrived, and that there will be money available to be made there. And I think they're taking a risk at it. Whether or not it pans out, I think is what we won't be able to see for a couple of years. But at least in the meantime, I think that's where they're going. And I mean, from my perspective, I don't see the mobile games as being targeted towards the current marketplace of players who are already playing EVE on PC. I think there's very strict delineations between the different platforms, and folks tend to stick with their platform. So I don't see a lot of crossover there, but I think it has the potential, as Nora said, to provide advertising and maybe get folks that might not have considered playing EVE to play EVE.
I also think we don't want to take the risk of connecting the ideas of AAA and long play session. I think AAA and long play session are completely different axes.
I suppose, yeah. I mean, Hearthstone would be considered more AAA, but definitely short.
Naros, do you have anything to say about this? What we're talking about? And
I don't have much to say about mobile games because I literally only play EVE, and it already took me a huge amount of time, so I couldn't afford any more other gaming entertaining. But yeah, what I see here is that it's really advertised to a much larger audience and bring more people into Serenity. And then when some people get tired of it, maybe the botting issue, the RMT issue, they still do not have a fix. So maybe if people ever get bored of Serenity, they may come over. That's what I hope.
I see. So you're saying that this is a tide that may raise all boats.
I think so. I believe so.
Everybody benefits from more people coming in and being
one more quick Chinese question.
Yeah.
Is it does one say Happy Singles Day or something like that in Chinese?
It's like Black Friday, and
you don't say that.
Yeah.
All right.
Wait,
that
what?
That was yesterday for you, wasn't it?
Today. All right. That's already yesterday.
Today is
25 minutes over.
The 11th still in America. So today is Singles Day in China, which is a massive. It's bigger than Black Friday and Cyber Monday put together by far. It's huge.
Like a speed dating day or something?
No, it's just a buy yourself a present day. Can you explain it, Noros?
Well, the marketer can always advertise invent something strategy, to better marketing, but it's basically say, well, we couldn't get you a partner in real life, so why don't you just buy yourself some? I believe last year, last year they sold maybe over 12 billion Chinese yuan over 3 hours, I think. Let me check the stats.
That's both inspiring and depressing at the same time.
That's right, at the same time. It's only happening on one side, like on every online selling sites.
I'm impressed that the online selling sites could hold up under that level of spike traffic.
But they definitely have better server than CCP then.
Oh,
Ooh, danger.
Quickly move away from that. Well, that's really interesting. I thought you were going to ask a question in Chinese, Carneros, because you know Chinese.
No. Yeah, I'm old, long time ago. I'm old. But
Like that.
it's great. It's great to have you on the show. 很高兴见到你了，谢谢你啊，欢迎你了。
Thanks so much. I remember we talked with each other in Vegas.
Yeah, in Vegas. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
on
you.
the elevator.
All right, thank you.
All right. Well, cool. So let's review real quick though that you were fighting in Scalding Pass against God, what are their names here?
Right side of death. If any of you remember Gorgon Empire.
Yes, Gorgon Empire, pretty good.
They were scary.
I thought they were underrated. They were really good, right?
That's right. But they after a while during the major FC, when AFK play maybe World of Warships, and some dramas within Gorgon, and then they kind of split into two sides. One is B Sword, and the other is Scorch, another Russian small scale like entity.
I've heard of them. Scourge.
Yeah,
they're supposed to be really good too.
And they're also very good.
And there's a group called Right Order.
Yeah, they were ex-Solar Fleet.
Who were also very good. So you're up against some really talented players.
I never get out of fighting Russians in my EVE career, you know.
Alliance tournament. That's how I know the Gorgon Empire.
Oh, Gorgon was really good in the game, and they lived basically in this same area. So I guess if this is remnants of Gorgon, they know the terrain. What was the deal with Skill Yourself? They're now your ally, right?
Skill Yourself is Scourge's ally. So that's part of the Russian Civil War.
Oh,
because you can see Siberian Squad showed up yesterday, and some other groups like No Value. Basically, every Russian come here showed up, and Barra, the leader of Skill Yourself, is a good friend of Seth Shadow, the FC from Scorch. So they team up together. It's a weird situation because Red Alliance and Triumvirate come to help B-Sword. They are my blue. I was on grid. My ramble was like my overview was like a ramble, and I could only shoot maybe XX, B-Sword, and the fours are. So my blue was helping the hostile, and I couldn't shoot them.
Oh, I see.
That sucks when that happens.
Confused. Yeah.
Oh, it's really fun. It's actually really fun.
So you make sure you only shoot XIX, you were saying?
Yeah. Make sure I only shoot XX and B-Sword. I was hiding my Eagle fleet behind Triumvirate's Macario fleet. So XX wouldn't warp straight directly to me, you know, on top of me. It worked, actually.
Well, that's more confusing than the North. Between NC and Dead Coalition and Horde and Black Legion and PL now.
Yeah, Russian politics. So
well, this is good, isn't it, for the game to break out into more theaters? So it's not just one big side against one other big side. I'll open that question up to all you guys. What do you guys think about the splintering out of different factions and different wars?
Well, I mean, people tend to be upset about the, quote, blue donut. So the more groups there are that are separate slightly from each other, the more likelihood of conflict. And people like fights, and they like small and medium scale fights. Not everything should be a Titan Brawl level fight. So it's good for the game. It makes people log in.
Yeah, the only concern that I would have would be that, you know, given the size of the Imperium, not having a group that feels confident enough to be able to take us on head on, I get a little concerned about that. But to Dunk's point, overall, I think.
Oh my God, so arrogant.
Just true. I mean, look, if you saw on Reddit the other day, there was a listing of the active Titans and Supers by Coalition, and the numbers are stark, as my War Deck friends would laugh at me for saying. They're pretty stark. Imperium has almost twice as many as the next biggest competitor. So I think that has to concern a lot of folks and make them worried that, we're not going to see more of these big wars because nobody's going to be willing to do them.
Whenever a change happens to Nullsec, I like to go back and read the old blogs from people like Jester from before the Nullsec changes happened to remind myself as to why they were happening. And one of the things is that the monolithic nature of Nullsec and the stagnant nature of Nullsec was one of the biggest problems. Capitals weren't dying. Super capitals were certainly not dying. And force projection made it so that basically no one can move anywhere because the boogeyman could show up anywhere. So the idea behind it, I remember even at the time they said, okay, well, we've got Germany, we've got the United States, but we need countries like Luxembourg to exist. We need smaller independent nations that are able to kind of lay low. And at the time it was suspected to be impossible. So whether or not we like these Nullsec changes or any given Nullsec change, it really seems to be that they are managing to hit at least their original intended goals for what to do with Nullsec by breaking it into these smaller organizations. This is something they've been working on for years.
Yeah. Well, this is a good transition. Naros, please stick around if you can. If you have to go, we understand. But we're going to start talking about the new mechanics changes that are coming in in this.
I'd love to hear.
Great. I guess let's start with the Ashtarothi. Do you want to begin us on what's coming in this next patch?
Oh, I didn't know I was going to do it. I can pull up
because I know you know it well
right now. No, I can talk about the details, but I don't have the patch notes up just to look at. But I will say that the
well, I can do it too.
Feature is definitely the new flex structures. So they're coming out with the new upwell structures that do not function like other upwell structures. They don't have quite as much defenses, and they don't have any offense at all. But they're kind of like mini structures that can be deployed within the shadow of some of the more defensible structures. They generally have one use, either sino jamming, sino beacon, or a gate, depending on which one you have. They do have a low power mode, and so that means that when they're not on, i.e. the sino beacon is not currently sinoing or the sino jammer is not currently jamming, then that means that they actually have no reinforcement whatsoever. As long as it's offline, somebody can just blow them up. Even if they are offline, even if they are online, they have a very short reinforcement timer to make it so that you have to respond and defend them if you want to. So overall, they're much easier to deploy, much easier to take down, and are not quite full upwell structures, but are providing this very important functionality from POSes to upwell.
Does that mean if an incursion comes into an area that all of the beacons are going to go into low power mode and you can go blow them up?
I mean, I would assume yes. I don't think anybody's tested that, but I mean, it's a structure that isn't on, and therefore it'd be low.
Well, I don't know if it's on and consuming fuel but suppressed and can't work, or if it turns itself off, doesn't consume fuel, and you better protect them.
Well, I guess my question is, what happens if you have a jump gate now, and then you light a sino jammer in the same system? Does that happen?
Well, the
No, it
jump
shouldn't have any impact.
Well, then maybe it doesn't have any impact at all. Who knows? We'll have to see. Oh, you mean like the sino? I don't know. Those are the kind of fiddly bits that we're going to have to see in practice. That's the big thing is that unlike the old upwell structures like Citadels, which we got like literally 6 months to experiment with before they got released, these things people have barely even seen, and they're going to become major infrastructure for EVE Online here in just like a week. And so it'll be interesting to see how the alliances respond to this, and more importantly, what mistakes alliances make because they don't understand the system 100%.
Well, yeah, so let's break it down first. We're talking about, hold on, Carneros. We're talking about, right now, we're talking about flex structures, right? There's other stuff that's coming in through this patch that we'll talk about in just a minute. Before you guys go super general, do we want to finish talking about flex structures? Because they've not been talked about much. Everybody's concentrating on jammers and sino beacons and gates.
Well, those are the flex structures.
Those are them.
Okay.
So I do have a comment about the flex structure.
Go ahead.
the cost of the BPOs is way too high.
Okay.
It's like fucking 18 billion for the BPOs. It's too much. That's more in BPO cost than an Athenor. And these things are freaking teeny. And think of the industrialists, the poor.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the concerns I think we all have is the ability for existing alliances that have this infrastructure to be able to source and replace all of the stuff that they're going to have to replace within the 2 weeks before these are shut down. I get the feeling that they're going to have to extend that time frame because it's just not, there's not going to be enough time. Plus the prices, like you said, I mean, 12 billion, 18 billion for BPOs for this equipment is really high, and it's really going to put pressure on some of the smaller groups that have this type of infrastructure that they need to replace it. Plus all of the types of sourcing and the fact that, at least in terms of the jump gates, you've got Triglavian material that has to be farmed that's going to be included in there. Granted, it's the same stuff that currently exists that you need to build the ships, but you've also got 2 new ships coming in too. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on the market, I think, for some of these materials, and that's going to jack the prices up even higher and make sourcing harder. So I think it's going to take some time.
It's just going to hurt. It's going to hurt the smaller producers. The people who are bigger groups have already acquired all the materials that are needed, like within 30 minutes of it coming out on Hobo Leaks. And so they've been acquiring all this time. And it's the smaller groups that are going to be faced with suddenly, holy crap, where are we getting 20, 30, 40 billion to replace what we already have? And then there's no reimbursement for the old system. So I'm not saying there's a great way to do it, but the BPO cost really is a burr in my rear end.
Yeah, I didn't actually know about the cost of the BPOs. That does seem pretty prohibitive and surprising, honestly. As far as the trig loot, though, not to jump into a different topic, but just to scratch it, realize that there will be a lot more trig loot being produced after the expansion. There are several reasons why trig loot will be much more common or easier to source in the Abyss.
But isn't the demand going up because of the new ships?
Right. Yeah, but I'm saying that there is also going to be a pretty big increase of supply.
More supply, more demand. I don't know that it's going to get any cheaper.
I didn't say cheaper, just not necessarily more expensive.
I honestly don't think it's going to get too much more expensive. I think it's probably going to remain about the same. Because people are already doing the Abyssal sites in like 10 minutes consistently, so if any of those new structures spawn that give extra materials, people are going to be able to take.
Yeah, let's bring in Exxon Fang here. Thanks for speaking up. Basically, what we're saying is that these things are going to be built using parts from Abyssal Space. Does that mean more people will play the Abyssal Space stuff that's coming out?
Oh, definitely. There's already been a huge spike in the actual filaments going out. I don't know if that's more to do with the 3-person frigate Abyssals, or if that's just people buying them up early because they know the price is going to spike. But a bunch of the ships have also risen up in price. A lot of the frigates have gone up significantly lately. The Worm, Succubus, and Retribution specifically.
Yeah, so I think if you want to get rich quick, you want to run those missions and collect this loot, so that because the market price for them is going to be sky high, right?
Definitely, especially on day one when the new mutaplasmids start. I already make 150 to 200 mil an hour very, very consistently doing T4s in about 10, 12 minutes. I expect that'll probably go up a bit initially until the mutaplasmid market kind of calms down. When they came out, mutaplasmids were going for several hundred million per. So you can definitely make a ton of money.
I think that's kind of exciting and interesting, right? I mean, they're actually making it so that if Nullsec wants to have these new tools, that they have to rely on the consistency and work of people who are doing the Abyssal Space stuff, whether it be Nullsec, Lowsec, or Highsec. But it's really putting a ton of pressure on this new Abyssal Space that some people haven't gotten into yet.
I think overall that's probably going to be a good thing. I think I'll be honest, I've run a lot of these sites. I've run Suetonia's Sacrilege Fit in T5 Darks, and it's pretty consistent. But it's fun, and it's engaging PvE, unlike a lot of the stuff that is currently in the game PvE-wise. I have more fun doing that than ratting. I have more fun doing that, definitely doing that than mining. And I think that provides an opportunity for another income stream for a lot of people. I think the concern really is just going to be in the first 2 or 3 weeks whether the market can withstand the amount of pressure that's going to be put on it for all the new ships, plus all of the new flex structures that require this stuff. Now, we brought this up, CSM. We've talked about it. I feel comfortable now that the market will be able to do that, but I still, until it actually happens, I want to see what the impact's going to be. But I think there's a lot of money to be made, so people should be thinking about that on day one.
I think that we're talking a lot about the Abyss feature changes. So if you want me to, I can touch on those real quick, and then we can.
Yeah, because
all I want to say is if you didn't already buy your covert research tools, well, you're going to pay a lot for them.
We'll come back to the flex structures, the gates, the beacons.
Good, because I have more to say
afterwards. Yeah, we'll come back to that because that's probably going to be a big. But let's move on to Abyssal Space, Ashtrathi, then Exxon Fang. If you guys want to talk about this section, I'm really interested in this part.
Sure thing. So Abyss is we're seeing a lot of changes to the Abyss. First of all, to the Abyss that we've already seen, there is actually a balance change being done to make it so that the lower tiers are a bit easier to get into, and possibly make the harder tiers a little bit harder. We're going to have to see how it works out because they're playing around with spawns and stuff. Additionally, as I said earlier, there's going to be more loot available because the Triglavians are extracting the minerals in the area, and we can blow up their extractors and pull more of the basic construction mats out of there. Additionally, there is now going to be the option to enter into the Triglavian sites with 3 frigates instead of a single cruiser. It will be very much the same kind of Triglavian, or the same sort of events with the same ships and everything, but now you've got 3 frigates to deal with it instead of a single cruiser. I have heard of certain people soloing even lower tier with a single, like a worm or something, and just getting 3 times the loot, which is an availability. Also, in tier 3 through 5, there is an option, or there is a chance that there will be an additional rift at the end of the 3rd room, which will lead you into the PvP arena. So there's a lot of questions about how to get into the PvP arena, where the filaments were going to spawn, and that's the answer. So you're going to actually fight your way all the way through a tier 3 through 5, and then enter into the battle arena. And if you manage to hold the arena for, I think it's like 10 minutes, then you will get an additional T5 reward. So all of that changes are coming to the Triglavian, or to the Abyssal Dead Space, on top of the new ships and everything else that's coming out of the rewards from there.
Yeah, and I've got a note on the PvP ones. You can be paired against any other 3, 4, or 5 filament. It doesn't have to be the same type. So people recognizing, hey, that's for gamma and I'm an electric or whatever, is going to be really, really important to be successful in those PvP ones.
I think that's going to require folks carrying a lot more stuff with them than they have been now, extra drones and types of ammo that are not just specific to the filaments that they're running. And that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. We've also been hearing a lot of concerns, at least within the Imperium, of what happens if I'm in an Abyssal site with somebody who's blue to me. Am I allowed to blow them up? So apparently this is something that everybody's thinking about. But I think 2 man enters, 1 man leaves. You got to fight. So it's going to be interesting to see how that works out.
Yeah, while the people can come from any weather system, the actual arena themselves at the moment have no weather. So, even if you're primed to, be great against kinetic or great against thermal, it isn't going to matter because there is no weather inside of the actual.
Well, in terms of what I'm talking about, that is the way that the other players have tanked their ships.
No, I know.
Based on what they expected inside. So you're going to have to do.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And the other thing is that I think that we're going to see a true meta emerge. In most video games, the idea of a meta is like, as one strategy becomes dominant, then the strategy that counters that strategy quickly becomes dominant. It's difficult to see that in like the bigger fleets, as it happens a lot slower, but in these really tight 1v1 arenas, I expect to see that very, very quickly. We're already seeing people starting to bring counter Gila fits just in case.
Explain that joke.
The Gila is just a classically powerful runner of PvE sites, including Abyss. And so the idea being is that if most of your opponents, if the average opponent is going to be in a Gila, and I have the correct equipment to deal with a Gila, then I'm going to win most of my matches.
Basically, what that means is that I'm going to replace the newt on my sacrilege with a smart bomb and be done.
Another note on the PvP ones is they're going to be extraordinarily valuable initially because they have a higher chance to drop all of the new mutaplasma.
Right.
Oh, okay.
You don't actually get.
Exactly.
I've never seen mutaplasmids drop in lower tiers, or at least it's extremely rare. They're mostly reserved for the higher tiers. So the fact that you have that tier 5 reward at the end is actually
This is very interesting because it looks like CCP is making the game very how do you put it, very organic in that you have to adapt to multiple situations and plan for multiple situations. And as you just said, you get multiple rewards. So if you go into a lower level abyssal space and you get into one of these 1v1 brawls and nobody shows up, it's possible that you're going to win level 5 materials that are very, very lucrative.
correct. Well, so now there's 3 different kinds of abyssal runs.
Right. The biggest loot, to be honest, isn't going to be the loot in the abyssal space. The biggest loot is going to be the enemy 2 billion ISK ship that went into this fight. That's where the big loot is going to be. And I think we're going to see a lot of amazing kill mails, a lot of fights, a lot of just battles between blinged out ships, and I think people are going to be really interested in seeing that stuff.
Plus, you get all of the abyssal loot that they are having that drops because they just ran their own.
Yeah, but you got to beat them to get that loot.
1v1 at the sun, and it's going to be awesome.
So, to explain what's going on a little bit, in the current Abyss, there's basically one condition. There's pass or fail. You either make it through it or not. And what CCP has experimented with in the past is kind of like, well, if you do it, then that's great. If you do it quickly, then it's even better. Whatever. If you take more risks, then it's different. And you're seeing that here, right? So if you just run the site as it is, then you get the normal reward. If you take the time and stop to blow up these extractors, then you get additional rewards. But remember, this whole thing is timed. So really that's just saying, if you have this extra time to do this extra thing, then you also get additional rewards. And then on top of that, there's also the chance that if you decide to take this extra risk, then you also get this additional reward. So there's 3 tiers now to abyssal space, to any given abyssal space run, which I think is really interesting. I shouldn't use the word tier since tier is already.
Yeah. I'm not actually clear on this. So if you go into abyssal space, you have a limited time to get out. And if you go into one of these further pockets to fight somebody else one-on-one, how much time do you have?
Don't confuse those two. So what I'm saying is that so you're going through the abyssal space and you've got the bad guys. You kill the bad guys, but let's say you're rushing. You're not sure if you're going to make it all the way through. You're not going to stop to fight to blow up the extractors and loot them as well. But if you're in a good ship and you've got 10 minutes to spare, then you might as well get that extra loot. In addition to that, there is also the PvP arena, which is its own timer. It's its own thing. Once you go through it, you've effectively finished your original abyssal site, and you're now in a new abyssal site with its own timer that will unlock the cache.
The timer resets.
As I understand it, it's 5 minutes in the PvP site.
Oh, okay. And if nobody shows up, then you get to take what's there?
After 5 minutes, it unlocks and you can get your stuff. Otherwise, you got to fight.
So I know people are going to want to bring blingy stuff, but I think that'll happen after the first week. So I think this first week, if you're jumping in there, you probably won't have a fighting. That's just an assumption. I think that people are slow to adapt. What
we're seeing now, especially with some of the rebalances, I've noticed is there has, and also especially since Eve Vegas, they revealed a lot of information about the Abyss, a lot of deep data about how the Abyss is being run. And I think that the mere exposure of that data has changed the way that people are running it, because I'm seeing a lot more stressing on low ISK ships. What is the minimum to do certain Abyssal sites. So I'm seeing like 30 million ISK omens that are able to run T3s. And I think that the reason why you do that is because, well, then you're just hoping that nobody else comes through. And even then, you know, like you're in a 30 million ISK omen and they're in whatever they're in.
You get killed.
Well, and I think that to that point, Astaroth is absolutely right. I think what you're going to see is right now everybody has been running all of these Abyss sites and blinged out ships because they're desperately making sure they get through. And the better modules you put on, the better pod you have, the better chance you can of getting through the ships okay and not dying. But now you got to take into account that not only do you have to get through the Abyssal site, you also have to deal with PvP on the end. And do you want to give up that kind of a kill mail? So I think you're going to start seeing people trying to balance that out with ISK versus reward.
So on clarification, you don't actually have to take that gate to the PvP arena if you don't want. So you don't have to necessarily prepare for PvP. But back on the note of the information they revealed that's on the stream right now, the probabilities of surviving the ISK versus tank and DPS is actually super useful to use as like a fitting guide. Because based on that graph, if you hit around 800 DPS and have between 200 and 400 active tank, you're probably going to survive your filament.
All right, I want some bottom lines here. How do people benefit from this? Somebody doesn't know about this.
Bottom line, the PvE people are going to have the same thing that they had before with a bigger market for Abyssal stuff. If they don't want to engage in PvP, they're not going to engage in the PvP. The people who do want to have the PvP fight are going to, in my opinion, be blinged out people who can't wait to get into that arena and get some huge kill mails. And so you're going to have these titanic battles between PvP specialists in one-on-one combat playing out in this space. Since it's voluntary, you are going to see a ton of high-level fights, and hopefully there's video for all of us to watch, because I'm terrified of going in there and do 1v1.
I'm telling you, if you want to get in there the first week, they won't be in there, I don't think. Or they will, but it'll just be like roulette. Right?
I'm telling you, I think the most blinged out stuff is going to be day one.
Yeah, I think a month from now is probably going to be the right time to do it.
Is that the right time?
I actually think that this is going to create a lot more frustration than it solves by the end of it, unless they change some things. And the reason why is because the entrance to the PvP arena isn't guaranteed. So that's going to lead to a lot of confusion for people that are trying to actually find it, but also it's just going to be frustration, right? So the people that want to do the PvP are now having to run multiple tier 3s in order to even be able to try to get into a PvP. And then other people are going to, I don't know, not realize what they're doing and wander in and get blown up and be mad. So I don't know, man. Like, I like the idea of like the ship has to qualify by having survived a T3, but at the same time, I'm not sure if the feature as it's implemented will be 100% like locked in.
I have a request. I have a request for the group. If you're talking to CCP, and I'm looking at you, Brisk, looking at you. If you're talking to CCP and they're in the mood to give up data, please ask them for, first 90 days, what percentage of people who go into an Abyssal site actually enter the PvP arena? And then second 90 days, because I think that second cohort will behave differently from the first. What percentage of people who enter an Abyssal Dead Space site actually also enter the PvP part of the arena?
I will tell you right now that the first one that you asked for is already on my list of stuff to ask for the second summit in February. So hopefully we'll have that data. I don't know whether they'll let us release it or not, but hopefully they will at least have it ready.
Well, I would compare the first cohort to the second cohort before making any decision of whether or not the thing is successful. Because if a bunch of people try it once and then never do it again, that's not the same thing, okay? Even though you can release stats later that say, oh, look, this many people went into this feature. It's not 0.5% of the active player base like some people might guess would use this feature.
Well, it's also worth noting that they do have a mechanic now to kind of temporarily encourage a specific feature through the agency. They did the Secrets of the Abyss last year, which was very successful, and they straight up said that they will be doing the Secrets of the Abyss again this year. Also, I imagine that even if this is a good test, The real big thing is when you're going to allow 3 frigate PvP, which is one of the things that they said that they're working on next if this is successful.
That I'm super excited for.
All right, let's not get ahead of ourselves. That's coming later. It's not coming Tuesday. All right, so I think this is very interesting. Look into it. Try to get involved with it. You know, I would do it early the first week. These guys that are better than me at this game say do it in a month when everything settles down, and get into it if you can, because that stuff's going to be worth a lot because they're going to be used. And I'm talking about the loot is going to be worth a lot. Used for some of the construction that's going to be coming up. Now, Dunk, you were saying that industry guys are getting screwed because the BPOs for these new flex structures is too high. But these things don't cost that much to produce. It's expensive to get the BPO.
For clarification, did they say where those BPOs are coming from? Are they dropping in the event?
I imagine they would come from ore,
I
right?
believe they're seeded.
BPOs don't drop.
Like Athenors. Look, it's one of these things where you have a kind of weird thing. I mean, look at the Athenor BPOs. I think they were $5 billion a pop. You can still buy a research Athenor BPO below the NPC or sell price.
Wow.
So BPOs over time, for some things, don't appreciate in value the same way, especially structures, because then you have them for a month or two, the initial rush is off, and the BPC prices drop dramatically. So people are looking at making a big investment, almost 20 billion, to buy BPOs, research them up, and then you're making a handful. Not everyone is at the scale of the Imperium. Smaller groups, they might need to make 6 or 7 jump bridges. That's it. So you're making 6 or 7 jump bridges for a 6 billion BPO cost, unless you're going to pay for the BPCs from somebody else who's going to sell them at a huge premium in JITA for the first few weeks.
Well, what about the replacements, though? These things are pretty easy to kill, aren't they?
Yeah, but in a month, these BPCs will be in JITA really cheap, right? So you have this weird thing of the BPO price initially, everyone who buys those BPOs is never going to pay them back.
So it's a bad investment unless you just need to sink the cost for the empire, for construction's sake.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's talk about
it's the same thing like the Athenors, right? I mean, I have literally built 80 Athenors, and I still don't think I've paid back the total cost of all the BPOs.
And you never will.
I bought 2 BPOs when they started. Right, and it's just that's what I do. I like to do it, so I'm not doing it to make a huge profit. It's what I like to do in the game. But I think these structures are smaller and have a way more limited use than the Athenors do.
Right, but I have a feeling that, and we'll get to this in a second, I guess, that these things are going to be killed off a lot quicker because they're a lot more important to kill off.
Let's worry about that second.
Yeah, but
talk them through what.
But again, the profit margin on small things is small.
All right, you're right, Carneros. Let's. What do we want to do? Tell them what the stuff is.
Let's create the scale of what it takes to do this 2-week transition, and then afterwards talk about how easy it is to tear them down and how they can basically be trolled, almost like Sinoceptors or Entosis interceptors used to do. But that got tuned out as soon as it was a problem. So these things get balanced and handled. But if we go back to the scale for a second, I want to point out that they're giving us 2 weeks of overlap. And in that 2 weeks, we have to go out to high sec, buy blueprints or low sec, maybe nearby, come back in. No one's going to probably research them right away. They're just going to copy them because you don't get a lot of benefit from you don't get material benefit much from researching a thing like this. But they'll make copies, and then they have to build these structures. In the meantime, while it's building, you have to go set up bookmarks for where you're going to want them in each system. You're going to have to finish the build, deliver them, and move them out to these systems. Anchor them on the bookmarks. Pair them up with the destination structure at the other end. I don't really know how that works yet. It's just in my head that you're going to have to do this. Fuel them, set up the access list, and then start taking down your star bases and your POS modules. But although that can wait till after the 2 weeks is up. And then you have to worry about bookmarks for your members. That's a fair amount of things.
Well, as someone who does this, Right. As someone who does this for a smaller group, now I'm sure at the Imperium level this is even more complex, but they have a much larger GSOL group and industry group than we do. The build, the placement, all of this stuff is not hard. It's just those components, all the structure components are built in advance. They're all ready to go. We know exactly what's going to be in the BPOs. The biggest discussion right now is how does a coalition align all the jump bridges, because it's inter-alliance jump bridges are now allowed. That's the main negotiation, is that at the coalition level, how do the jump bridges work? And then again, the decision of, do we go to using the new Sino beacons? Some groups have never used Sino beacons. Other groups use Sino beacons all the time. The actual builds, most of the components on most of the major groups, it's already built. They're just waiting for the blueprints to show up. They research a couple TE levels and throw them into build, and they're done pretty quick.
Yeah, we're so organized that the part of setting them up across coalitions is not a problem for us, but the scale is hard for us. We have to do 32 jump bridges in Delve.
All right, hold on. Let me cry a little tear for the Imperium's problems.
That's 52 bridges, so it's 104 structures, because you have to have two, one at each end. So the scale is a lot of work, and it's not that big a GSOL group, honestly.
Yeah, that's going to be. I mean, that's the hard part right now for any of these major changes. Is that in the meantime, especially when you've got changes that are replacing something that already exists in the game, everybody wants that functionality back as soon as humanly possible. Which means the first 2 or 3 weeks, the poor logistics guys are going to be running around like chickens with their heads cut off. No offense, Exxon. Because that's what they're going to have to do. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that works. My big question is, all right, fine, we get it all set up. What happens when attrition starts? And how are we going to, how is that going to play out? And
nice segue.
Now that these things are able to be blown up, and how are they going to be defended? And a lot of those questions. And I know we have had a large number of discussions internally with the CSM. I know Sort and I have talked to the FCs. Killer Bees talked to the FCs. We're concerned about how defensible some of these structures are going to be, how easy they're going to be to kill, how hard they're going to be to kill. And just as a plug, in 2 hours on CC 1900 Eve, which is 2 o'clock Eastern, ProGod is going to be leading a mass test of the jammers and how defensible they're going to be. So if you want to take part in that and join up and try to fight and blow these things up, check out CC at 1900 Eve and look for the fleets in there that hopefully will be fighting it out to see whether or not these things are as defensible or as not as defensible as we seem to think they are or may will be.
Should we bring Asher Elias in here to talk about the war characteristics of this? We will, but keep going with it.
I think it's dangerous to assume competence. I hear a lot of people that are just like, oh yeah, people that know what they're doing. But I want to remind everybody the number of people whose carriers accidentally got turned into faxes because they weren't paying attention. Or, how many mistakes were being made when we were first launching Upwell structures like the Citadels. Mistakes are going to be made, and, this stuff is critical, and they don't have enough time or a lot of time. So like I said before, the biggest thing for me is going to be the stories, the hilarious stories about things going very wrong.
I don't know. I take a little different point of view. I think the building is not going to be as traumatic. It's costly as I'm concerned. The building of them is fairly straightforward. The fact that we get a 2-week overlap between the old gameplay and the new gameplay is a godsend to the logistics people to get that stuff in place. I have no idea what happens with the shooting of them and the onlining and the 5-minute timers. And I'm leaving that to people who know that stuff. But the actually deployment, having 2 weeks is fantastic from a logistics point of view.
All right, let me bring in Asher Elias. Just arrived. Just to let you know, he'll be speaking in a minute.
The other thing I want to point out, since this is one of those things that got talked about a lot and then got lost in the sauce, is that they did make a change, which is that Stargates, the new player-built Stargates, will not allow super capitals. So no bringing your Titans from one side of the galaxy to the other with no fatigue using these jump bridges. But you can do it with like a carrier, for example.
I always thought that complaint was not realistic. I mean, the way that they have set these new jump gates up in terms of the amount of fuel that they use. It was going to be cost prohibitive to move Titans and Supers across. And the whole point of these gates was that they were supposed to be, literally, they're supposed to be stargates. They're player-created stargates. This was one of the last things that was on Seagull's plan from 2015, that we were going to finally get to the point where almost everything in the game was player-created, could be destroyed by players. And this was the last thing. And I think everybody complained and freaked out, oh my God, we're going back to 2013. Not that I think, frankly, that would be a bad thing, given the fact that everybody's got Supers and Titans now, and moving them around means more of them die, which is good. I think that a lot of the concerns that folks had about those gates was a little overblown, but they've made the change. I don't see them changing it back, at least anytime soon. But I don't think that was as big a deal as folks initially thought it was going to be when they heard about it at Vegas.
There is the new big deal, though, which is that they changed it. Currently, with the current jump bridges, if you are pointed, you're not allowed to jump. However, these are going to function much more like stargates. So unless you're a capital that's infinipointed, you will still be able to use the stargate, which some people are frustrated about, but I think actually will be better because it lends consistency to behavior.
Correct. And that's why I think people need to break out of the current mindset. These are not jump bridges. They are different. They are stargates. Treat them and assume that they have the same mechanics as a stargate and everything's fine. So all the stuff you can do to a gate now, you can do to these gates. Plus, there's other stuff that you can't do to a regular Stargate that you can do with these. For example, playing ACL games. That's going to be ASL games. That's going to be fun. I think Matterall hates fake free ports. Imagine what we get when we get fake jump gates. That's going to be hilarious. I can't wait to have a group thinking they're going through a free ported Stargate and get locked out and then get blown up on the other side. I think that's going to be great. So there's going to be a lot of good new gameplay that I think the gates are going to bring in, that folks are too busy worrying about the old meta and not thinking about all the possible opportunities in the new meta.
All right. At this point, I'm going to bring in two new guests. First is Asher Elias. How you doing, Asher?
I'm something's happening.
Are you
I'm here.
Good, man. I know it's a rough night. And Tuzzy's here from G Soul. How are you doing, Tuzzy?
Hey guys, how are y'all?
Oh, you sound like hell, bro.
Oh, I sound a lot better now than I did 5 days ago.
Well, Asher's probably wiped out because he went out last night. That isn't doxing, is it?
I made some good decisions. You can share it with the class. I bought enough for everyone.
We missed you Saturday Night's Forum last night.
It's Saturday.
Exactly.
All right, let's get back to it. We're talking about gates, I believe. Okay.
Correct. Yes, we're talking about the new flex structure, specifically the new player-built Stargates and its military and application. And
so, what was the last conclusion that we were just discussing?
We were mostly just talking about how there were some certain fears about its application, especially involving super capitals or just generally like how it would change force progression. And I believe that we were agreeing that it wasn't going to be as bad as everybody said it was going to be.
Well, one thing I'd like to bring up, there are so many people that are, it seems like to me, based on just reading over discussions on Reddit and, in various other places, there are so many people offering their opinions on what they're concerned about related to force projection that haven't really, I guess they don't do logistics and they don't realize what an absolute nightmare it is going to be moving around large amounts of liquid ozone to fuel these things.
Exactly.
A jump freighter can hold a Rhea with max jump freighter skills with the faction cargo expanders could hold 966,000 LO. We mathed it up before they did the mass reduction or the mass cap where it says you can't have a Titan move a Titan through them, or we were like, okay, well, if there's a send a fleet of 255 Titans through one, how much LO is that, right? It's going to be something on the order of like 40 or 50 freighters, not jump freighters, freighters of LO just to go a single jump through the network. So to send a Titan fleet from, say, Delve to Cloud Ring, would be, one, very expensive, two, cancerous to move that much LO around. I mean, you would wipe out the market, like the entire supply of JITA of LO or Delve in a short order if you were doing that on a daily basis. So that was only ever a thing that could happen like, once every 6 months in like in a dire emergency, not something we'd be doing every single day. And two, I don't want to move that much LO around, guys. Like everyone's freaking out about this, and it was never really that big of a deal.
And that's one of the hard parts when we get announced stuff at Vegas or some of these other groups. Everybody gets together and we start talking, but nobody sits and thinks about, the long-term potential of what it's going to take to do this. And I feel like that's one of the concerns that I have with, and Asher can talk a little bit more about this, with the way that folks have been complaining about the Sino-jammers and how easy or how difficult they're going to be to kill. I think until we get them on TQ, and I mean, I know ProGuide's trying to do his test in 2 hours, but until we get them on TQ and we actually see these things in action and see fleets and doctrines and meta that come around trying to blow them up, I got folks saying they're too squishy. I got folks saying they're too hard to kill. And it's hard to tell how it's going to play out until it actually plays out. So a lot of these things we're not going to know until we test it on the server.
Yeah, I can't answer for the military questions. That's Asher's department. But the other thing is, do any of you old bitter vets remember what the price of LO was before fatigue got added to Jumbry? Like, what was the average price of LO per ISK? Was it like?
Tezzy, don't you know this because you invested in it beforehand?
Well, no, I invested in it 6 months ago. I didn't invest in it 5 years ago. What did it used to be? Was it like 400 or 500?
No, I don't think it's ever been that high in high sec or mining.
So are we talking like what, 150, 200, 250, something like that? Or was it even?
That's kind of what I remember from a couple years ago. It never seemed like a big expense when we were fueling the old style jump bridges years ago.
All right, so they've removed fatigue. So if they just kept them at the same LO use with removing fatigue, then you could expect, presumably, that they may go back up to those same levels. Well, on top of that, they've also quadrupled the amount of LO it takes to send a ship through. The base unit, the base value has went from 500 in the algorithm to 2,000. So it's more than, it's quadruple what it was before. So that combined with the fact that the usage of them is no longer going to be suppressed because you don't get fatigue through them anymore, I foresee LO going way the fuck up. Matterall, from like a year ago, like a year down the road, 2 years down the road, once all the stockpiles are used up, I think LO prices are going to skyrocket. So there's all sorts of reasons in which I'm not super worried about the force projection, because it's just going to cost so much money. And unless CCP does a mass reduction to LO, kind of like what they did with Moongoo, 6 months ago, a year ago, whenever they did. So it's just a lot easier to move large amounts of LO around. And I don't see them doing that because Reddit would have a meltdown.
It would affect a lot of other systems.
Yeah.
It also would be contrary to the whole point of why they're doing what they're doing.
Right. So I think people need to calm down and let's wait a couple months and see what happens before everyone gets all.
You guys are all too reasonable. Holy moly.
Inject some fire in here.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thanks for having me on the Silver Fox Hour with host Dark and Sword. This has been really illuminating. I think the jump bridge thing is probably priced right for the current market. I think they priced it with workforce in mind. I mean, you listen to it, and it sounds like they are making a conscious decision to with Rorqual's intended to use. So I mean, I think that the Titan thing was overblown, like Tezzy said, and they just sort of threw everyone a bone by not allowing them through it all. But it was never going to be a big thing. It was going to be like you maybe brought along your bridging Titan, maybe, and
Agreed.
Yeah.
Someone ganked him.
I'm having a sound problem. So did he cut off there?
He did.
Yeah, he cut off for me. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There you go.
So it was only going to be a bridging Titan. It wasn't going to be a whole capital fleet moving through there. And why would it be, since you guys can already do that without paying for it?
Yeah, the cost difference was substantial. I mean, I don't know the actual numbers, but it would be inadvisable to actually do it. With Liquid Ozone and
I made an assumption that LO price was going to say go up to 300 ISK per, right? And based on a 300 ISK per cost increase, sending a single Titan through one Stargate, one jump was on the order of 10 million ISK for that single. So multiply that by 250 times like 3 or 4 jump bridge jumps, and you start to realize how expensive it's going to be to send through. And we're not even talking about the isotopes you're going to have to burn from all the jump freighters going out to put the LO in the gates, or the cancer that is like catapulting freighters out to fuel the. It's just, no, it's not something that's going to happen on a regular basis if they had allowed it.
I know at the time when I was talking to people about this, people were assuming that ships would just bring their own fuel and like load it in and then jump through. But it doesn't sound like even that's going to be practical.
I mean, then if you're really going to like a knockdown, drag out ULX or X-40 Summit or something like that fight, if you're carrying enough LO on your own Titan to send your own Titan fuel, you're reducing the time and hours that you'll be able to fire your Doomsday once you get there, because that means you're not carrying the necessary ice.
Which turned out to be an important thing in those fights. Have you guys talked about the signaling that they're sending with this, both between the jump bridge and the Sino Jammer, that they are sort of all in on Empire play and making it much safer? The jump bridge to some smaller degree, but the Sino Jammer to a much bigger degree.
No, go ahead.
Tell us that.
Well, I mean, I heard Brisky saying that some people are saying that it's going to be way too easy. I don't know who these people are. Like, it is not way too easy to kill the new Sino Jammer. There is essentially no counterplay to this Sino Jammer. If they want to defend this, they have gone and said, "Hey, this is holy Brisk. Is that your spawn? And is he like mini me? I love that. Oh my goodness."
He's making me. But he wanted to come down and be on the show.
Brisk child walked by with. Does he have a coat on?
Yeah.
He literally is a mini Brisk.
Yeah, I think his jacket had those anchor buttons on it. You know, those gold anchor buttons, like when you're ultra waspy. Like, wow, that was amazing. Sorry, I got so distracted there.
Sorry.
Go back to the.
That is awesome. That's just so
sovereignty,
awesome.
The sovereignty thing you were talking about. Yeah.
So the Jammer is going to be incredibly difficult to take down. I talked about this on Reddit, and I think Kendar made a post. And presumably, if you're a goon, you should be the person who would most enjoy or benefit from making your space empire safer, right? But I don't know any goon FCs who think it's a good idea. I don't know any FC period who thinks it's a good idea. I don't know who proposed this and who was the person who came up with sort of the 30-minute cap. I think that there are people. This is sort of speculation, but I'm going to guess that there are people who are currently under attack and who came up with a system that benefited them, or who were pushing for a system, let's say, that benefited them personally. And I think that's probably a bad way to take input.
By the way, Boat thinks it's a good idea. He's saying there in chat.
I think that it's. I would say that it's dangerous to imply that CCP is just like factoring in because somebody happens to be losing. I think that every Upwell structure that has been released in a way to give a little bit more power to the player's hands in order to ease the transition. And I don't necessarily think this is any different than that.
I mean, the player who owns it, right? That's what you mean, because it takes power away from anyone who wants to attack it, right? So you're enfranchising the possible one person who owns it, but you are disenfranchising everyone who wants to attack them, because it is just that much harder.
Well, except for all Sino-jammers right now automatically defend themselves. All jump beacons automatically defend themselves. Now that will not be.
You're talking about POSCons?
Yes.
Right. I mean, right. If I come out in my one Orthrus, yes, your Sino-jammer is significantly safer for my one Orthrus currently than it is, than it will be in the future. But that's the one scenario where they're currently safer. There's no scenario where the POSCons were like a real issue for taking out Sino-jammers. And
well, Asher, you're a block FC. You're the kind of guy we bring out for a big war and stuff like that. You're not the kind of guy who has to respond if Fountain Core goes out to a distant thing and pings it until you show up.
Yep.
That's going to happen to me on a daily. It already happens on a daily basis. So that's just going to be more common in the future.
Yeah, it's Entosis trolling, right? So you can hit multiple places at the same time. You don't know necessarily which one to go to, and if you go to whichever one you don't go to, it's going to get.
No, you're talking about them pinging Sino-jammers?
They're going to hit. Well, right now they hit a variety of things. Yesterday, of all things, it was a Sino beacon on a POS. But they will, they'll hit jammers. They'll hit not so much jammers. They'll hit bridges. They'll hit beacons because they'll be more common.
Well, I mean, I don't think anyone is nearly as upset about a beacon or a bridge. It's the jammer. The jammer is such a powerful thing. Like the logistical power of a jump bridge is really strong. But it's also something that we've had in sort of similar form for such a long time that no one's like, oh no, a jump bridge on a Keepstar is an unfair thing. I mean, it's going to make camping it harder, right? Like it's going to make it much harder to camp a jump bridge. But I mean, here's the thing: that Keepstar Doomsday, the bouncing multiple thing Doomsday, it's guaranteed to get a kill every time it fires, basically, on a subcap. It really changes the way you think about assaulting these things. And there's a reason that we never, during this Northern War, we never went and assault and ref the Keepstar initially with subcapitals, because you either have to bring some really super cheese doctrine that has, I call them sacrificial anodes. It has ships that are meant to die.
We do that. I mean, that our Bush Raven fleet for Keepstar, it was designed to deal with Keepstar Doomsdays, and yes, we bring sacrificial ships that are designed to tank or at least to suck one.
Right. And so then they get a guaranteed kill on your most expensive ship, right? And then it bounces to your chaff ships. And
it's only guaranteed if somebody's there to pull the trigger. And like I said, this isn't like a Keepstar where you get two giant timers where it's like, okay, this is where we are. If it just so happens that your Sino beacon Sino jammer isn't up yet, they just kill it before you.
So the thing is,
Ash, if this is going to be you're not going to be using Sino jammers in systems that aren't actively contested.
Right, exactly.
It up all the time. So this is going to be something that's actively being contested. You're going to have the Keepstar being gunned. You're going to have opposing fleets on grid 2. So I understand Escher's point in that regard.
Yeah, we're not talking about your distant jump bridge. We're talking about the Sino jammer. There will be one person to press the Doomsday button. Like if that's too low of a bar of entry, you probably don't have a Sino jammer to begin with. So the key is that here's the thing.
I don't agree with this premise though, because we use Sino jammers just to protect ratters, right? So I don't know, man. I see other applications of it.
So we're the opposite, because we don't do that because it makes it impossible to save anybody. So we leave the Sino jammers up unless we're actively contesting.
I understand like that. So that your Sino jammer will be more vulnerable than the one in the home system. But we're not talking about the Sino jammer that's out in the routing system. We're talking about the one that prevents you from attacking a system. And the important part about Eve, in my opinion, or one of the important parts that is those sort of big fights. And if you make a system that denies those big fights, I think CCP shoot themselves in the foot, first off, because I think a lot of their good publicity comes from that. And I think that there's a large amount of their player base who really enjoys that. I mean, if you look on on Reddit or anywhere where people talk about it, like there's always these people who are poo-pooing tie-dye, but then there's also a bunch of dudes who are like, those epic fights are why I joined EVE, and they're why I play EVE. And like, oh yeah, I don't really like the tie-dye, but I like to be part of something. And if you are making,
I like tie-dye better than lag. So.
Yeah, exactly. If you're making a system that denies that something, it is bad for your company in the long run, I think. And so what they're really saying is, we are behind Empire and safe gameplay when they make this system. I mean, I assume that, or they don't understand. I don't know which of the two it is, but it's got to be one, I think.
I think one of the problems is a lot of times when they're working on balance for these types of things, everybody's looking at, or how do I break this? What's the edge case? And that tends to be how some of the stuff gets balanced. When I think that's not going to be the vast majority of the applications of this stuff. But I know we've talked. These structures were the biggest point of contention at the last summit. You can see it in the minutes. I think everybody was concerned with how they were going to play out. I know that the structure team, the guys that have been working on this 5.0, have been willing to work with us to make changes. These were different than were presented to us because we had a lot of concerns. The CSM did, and I know the community did as well, and they've made changes based on community issues too. But I honestly think that until we get these things live and figure out, all right, what's the meta going to be? Are they impossible to kill? If so, then we got to adjust the damage cap. We've got to adjust the hit points on these types of things and make it a little easier. We'll see. But I think we're not going to happen. And the problem right now that I think the biggest issue that I have with testing it now is there are no wars going on. We've got no really active contested places right now where you've got big Keepstar fights. So it may take a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months before we get into one of those wars where this stuff can actually be put into practice. And I'm hoping that once that happens, the CCP will be there and they'll be willing to iterate and fix this as soon as we can identify that there is a problem, whichever way it is.
I mean, it's a good hope, but here's my concern is that you will have a situation where this is something I always say that is a problem with CCP is they don't understand when wars don't start. Reasons wars do not begin. Reason fights do not happen. And like, if you're in charge, Briscoe, of a campaign initiative, right? Like if they made that kind of mistake and put you in charge, yeah, would you go and try to take one of these down? Like, would you send your fleet through the gate that's already bubbled because you can't jump in, that has their carriers skynetted on the Fortizar already, where you're going to have people DC 10%, 20% of you guys are going to DC on the jump in, and they're in perfect position.
Not that dumb.
Yeah, like, okay, so who like they won't see the test results because we are rational actors. We're not going to throw our things in the meat grinder to prove them.
Right.
Well, that's a result.
If they can
that's something that has to happen. I mean, that has to be seen. If we have multiple fights where both sides form and nobody takes the fight because of the Sinojammer being too powerful and nobody wants to take the risk, then that's
right. And
that's
I think
obviously something.
That's the data point, right? But here's my point: is that we're going to be talking about it. It's going to be Mittens, myself, and friends, and we're going to be in our smoky room, and we're going to be like, oh, we should go to war and pull the strings or whatever it is we do, right? But then we're going to go, no, we shouldn't, because we don't want to deal with this, and it just won't happen. And so you won't even see the results of that because we're not going to put out a press release like, hey, we decided to go to war, but it kind of sucked, so we didn't do it. Like, you just won't ever see those results, and sort of the law of unintended consequences. And I think what CCP misses out, this is sort of a broader issue, but by them not being allowed to be involved in the game in a real way, their employees, none of them can ever actually get a feeling for when that happens because they don't know.
And that's the thing. That's one of the reasons why, and people laughed at us when we had our list of 4 things that we wanted CCP to do at the summit. And number 3 was let the devs play the game.
I was so happy to see that.
so that they can get that kind of experience. Because otherwise, you're exactly right. They won't know, and unless you're physically there doing it. But your point about fights not happening and what causes fights not to happen, that's 100% behind the reason why I was so hard over on getting these fax changes. And we're finally starting to see some of these fax changes in this expansion.
Thank you.
But it was because they were deterring fights. You know, if you didn't have enough faxes, you wouldn't take a fight. You know, and that frustrates the hell out of me. And I think that makes it difficult to do some of this balance stuff, because you're absolutely right. You know, you can't balance stuff that doesn't happen.
Right, and I'll specifically I'll be in a fleet of, and I know Carnos has been there before, and I'll be in a fleet of like 60-ish stars, and we'll see one fax. We'll be like, all right, let's go. Like, let's leave. Because that one fax is there.
You're never going to break it.
Yeah, the best case scenario is that it has no friends, it has no Sino, and it runs out of cat boosters in an hour. Like, that's the best case scenario to get a kill. It's not worth it. Let's just go on and try to find something else.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that I think makes me happy, that they were at least willing to listen to us when we made those complaints and try to make some changes to make that a little less. But you're absolutely right, and that is one of the inherent risks in what they're doing. Hopefully, given the fact that, like I said, and I plugged this 2 times, this will make it 3. ProGod's trying to test this stuff out in an hour and a half on CC, and maybe we can get some data from that. We'll see what happens one way or the other. If being honest,
how do people tell people how to get there?
Log on to. Honestly, I can't tell you because I'm not 100% sure. Log on to the Singularity server. I would say look in your fleet finder, see if there are fleets that are open that are being run by ProGod. Hop in there. I'm sure they'll have something in the MOTD that'll tell you what to do. If you've never been on CC before, it's very easy to move around. There's a command /move me that will move you and whatever ship you're in to a pre-listed group of systems, and it'll probably end up being FDTAC or one of those, because that's where we tend to move everything to.
Chris,
but I think you'll be able to do that.
In the chat, UK Alley Cat says they don't want to risk another T20 scandal in reference to CCP having their players involved in the game on a more than superficial level. Do you have any insight on to their feelings about T20, like maybe not in particular, but their feelings about they're worried about the integrity of the game if they're not. I mean, the fact is, one of the things that we were very happy to hear was that the devs are playing the game, and that they do play the game. We asked, do any of the developers have Titans, and they said something like 6 of them did. So that these guys are playing the game. They just can't be overt about it, and they have to be behind the scenes, and they can't tell. And it's very difficult because a lot of the things that you can't do when you can't have your face shown or you can't have your voice heard, because people may have heard that or know that you're doing something. You know, and anytime you hear somebody with an Icelandic accent in comms, you're going to wonder, I wonder if that's a dev. So it's one of those things where it's difficult, but they do play the game. They don't want them playing at like the super high alliance level. They can't want directors of corporations or alliance leaders, but they are physically in the game all the time. But that's, I mean, I don't foresee them. I don't think that a worry about another T20 incident is keeping them from letting folks play. I think in reality, it's more they have to have time, and they're doing a lot of other stuff. And frankly, the amount of stuff that's going on behind the scenes right now is pretty crazy, between trying to help all the changes for Serenity in China, all the new stuff that they're programming now, the war deck changes that they're working on for December and for next year. A lot of these teams are really taxed, and they push this expansion pretty hard as well. So these guys have been working like 80-hour weeks for a couple months now to get all this stuff done. I don't know what kind of time they have to play in the interim. I know that every time I hear someone speak up in comms with a Korean accent, I wonder if they're here to sell us cat.
Sorry, you go. What?
Yeah, sure.
I couldn't hear him. He got cut off again for me.
It's I'm referencing the.
It was an anime joke.
Oh, okay.
Sort of.
All right. Are we pretty much talked out on these flex structures? We'll know more about them after they get deployed. It seems like there's definitely a lot of speculation going both ways. And it looks like I don't know if the EVE players are ready for this, and is that a bad thing?
Wait, is there a lot of speculation going both ways, or is there, one David Duke-esque character that they're having to offer the other perspective on the news, even though he's not representative of a large number of people?
I think the going both ways is not specific to the jammers. I think it's, if you look at all three of the flex structures, some people are worried about their sensitivity to trolling, and others are worried about how hard it's going to be to actually get a fight through these things on the jammers. That's the both sides. I might be wrong.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. I don't know if it's David Duke because Reddit lets anybody talk who wants to talk, but I do know that people are complaining mostly on one side. I think if you, because there was something written on Reddit by one of your colleagues,
Kendar. Yeah.
Kendar, yeah. So I don't know. We
did have a large conversation in one of the FC channels, and I think Asher's point is pretty valid. There tends to be a pretty solid amount of belief that these are going to be very overpowered and they're going to cause a lot. And I know I've heard from other people, at least one other person, who thinks the opposite. So we shall see. But it's hopefully we will be able to see in a way that doesn't involve, a lot of not missed fights or bad things happening. But until the stuff lands on TQ, I mean, and one of the things Mitten says all the time is, until it's live, he doesn't care about it. And I think that's really one of the problems we're going to have to deal with, is until the stuff is live, it's going to be very hard to get people to pay attention to it when it's...
He doesn't care about it because he doesn't have to. These guys are the ones that care about it.
In a note to the defense, FCs are notoriously stupid people, so I don't know if you can trust.
Did y'all talk about? I missed most of the first half of the show because I was out. Did y'all talk about BPO costs and build time considerations? Okay.
Yeah. Dunk did not.
So I missed the good stuff.
The stuff. When we get involved in these type of discussions, Asher's always on the edge of his seat with what we have.
I love it.
As an aside, given the fact that these new Cynojammers are going to be ACL controlled, is that going to also open up a new vulnerability? Whereas people might be able to, you'll want to give people the rights to be able to do stuff, but maybe a spy will be able to shut it off at a key point.
I say no because we are super, super tight on security. And
it means no for us.
No for us. But think of all the idiots who allowed us to still keep stars on other citadels up north during the war because I don't know why these nincompoops had access to these sort of things to be able to transfer them, but they were handed out. Seems like anyone with a pulse had access to transfer citadels. In GSOL, it is incredibly strict who has those access, and the people that have access to make those changes could do way more worse things than give someone access to a jump bridge. So that's not a problem for us, but there's many other people out there who, I don't know, it's like some 12-year-old kid and his high school buddies running a corp, and they're handing out access, and I'm sure there's going to be spies in that do hilarious stuff with ACLs.
What I mean by that,
we have one holding corporation with 10 guys in it, all of whom are super trusted, and they're the only ones that can do anything. And all of our strategic assets are run out of the.
I have a theory. Hold on, Ash. I have a theory, Tuzzy, that you guys actually made the deal with Sort Dragon because you saw that those were getting handed out. And you thought, we should get some of those. And then you proposed the...
Somewhat.
What? Sorry, what was getting handed out?
The faction fortizars.
Wait, he was handing them out to his own people?
Yeah, that he was handing them out.
But he did that back in June.
Wait, well, let's hear the whole theory first before we poo-poo it.
Go ahead. This is a new one to me. So
this is totally my theory, and only me. Nobody else has said this.
So with the ACLs, what? Or is this?
No. This is the deal that came up with the North to say, you know what, we want some of those faction fortizars, so let's make a bargain to get some of those. And you guys were, I don't know if you were going to stop anyway. I think you guys were. And so you thought you put the deal down to get some of the treasure out of those faction fortizars.
I think there's no grand narrative that you won't enjoy believing in Matterall. I think that's just you just love those narratives.
That's my job.
And you know what?
Planned at the Bob Barbecue in 2010.
We are happy to keep feeding them to
come to fruition now.
If only you knew the bumbling and stuff. Like, it was basically like how I got up out of bed this morning. That's how we run things normally.
Okay, so all right.
Exactly
Was Aerith freelancing it then?
So if I can go back to what I was talking about.
No comment.
No comment.
No comment.
So my concern is that if like it's an accessibility issue, right? You need to have somebody that's available to turn it on, but yet anybody who has the ability to turn it on also has the ability to turn it off, right? So you have to have enough people that have the capability of turning it off and on, but every single person that you add to that list is another vector for it being messed up.
Correct.
Yeah, there's like 5 people per group that can do that. That's how it is.
What are you
It's not
talking
like
about?
they're
For turning
handing
the
it out like
jammer on and off? You're talking about for turning the jammer on and off? Yeah, we have is it, I forget, is the ability to turn the jammer on and off, is that just like most other Upwell stuff related to the corporate role station manager? Is it the same for the new ones?
I thought it was based on the ACL. Like,
couldn't you just
I don't think so.
Ashtarothi, so for your systems, we're using them for like ratting, where they're not really strategically important, they're tactically important. Couldn't you use a different ACL or even put them in a different alliance that controls that jammer, so you can add a lot more people to that ACL, and then for your strategically important ones, have 3 people be able to control it? I don't want to run your alliance for you. I'm just throwing this out there.
No, I know.
Actually, I think the issue is going to be that in order to turn the module on, you've got to have control of that iHub.
So,
because you have to set up a module in order for it to work. So I don't know if that's going to work if you don't have the same.
That's for the anchoring. That's for the anchoring of it all.
I'm talking about
just turning it on and off. It's going to be turning on. And I just think you assume that those rights are handed out a little more freely than they actually are in organizations.
And I assure you that they're not.
Well, that's not what he's saying, though. He's saying
trying to say that you have.
I think that's exactly what he's saying. He's saying someone who has the right to turn them on.
Yeah, let's let him say what he's saying.
What I'm saying is that you have an access issue, right? So you have two conflicting pressures. You have to have enough people so that you always have somebody available to turn it on when you need it to, but you can't have too many people to make it so that it's exposed to spy vectors. Now, the Imperium may have this puzzle solved because you have a lot of people to throw at the problem, but smaller organizations will have this problem. And I know that because we have a gunner issue. Especially back when gunners could also strip the weapons off of the citadels, we had a really big issue because it was like, do we give somebody gunner or do we not? We need people to be able to be gunners, but we also need to not have people strip the stuff off. So if somebody can turn it off, if somebody can turn it on and turn it off, then every single person that you give the right to be able to turn it on can also turn it off. And you need a certain collection of people in order to be able to do that.
3 things. One,
so don't hand it out like.
I think you're correct in that it's not a big issue for large groups that have a lot of people with lots of layers of security, and we've already solved this issue because the issue is already solved the way we've solved all the other access issues. 2, Apple Parent Chat confirms it is a service module that you have to be able to turn on and off, and therefore you need to have station manager corporate role. It's not an ACL issue. 3, I'm going to completely change the conversation for just a second to remind everyone that there has been a bug in the game for 6 months, as I reported to CCP 20 separate times, that prevents station managers from renaming an Upwell structure, even though the dialogue error pop-up says you must be a station manager to rename a structure. It only lets CEOs and full directors do it. Please, for the love of God, CCP, fix this. Now, please continue.
Okay, well, we actually have to wrap it up. One more
desyncs you.
One more comment from Asher. One more comment from you.
Well, I'm just saying, I think that what Ashtarothi is saying is an issue, but I think that an organization of his size can get around it by probably you'll have to have a holding alliance or something different for your strategic ones if you want to give a lot more people access to your tactical ones for ratting. I think that's going to have to be the choice. Although they're making it more expensive, right? To run them for multiple systems, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if that'll affect it at all, but I think that won't be as much of an issue.
The
All
key is you just have lots of different profiles, lots of different ACLs and different layers, and citadels that are less important that you care less about are given out more freely, and ones that are more important are restricted to fewer people that are very, you highly.
All right, we're going to leave it there. There's more discussion to be had. We'll do it next week. But actually, I want to announce right now that Talking in Stations is going to be doing 2 shows per week from now on. We'll be starting that this next week. Artemis Obozo will be taking a Thursday show. So we're going to have 2 Talking in Stations per week. And thanks to all the Patreons who have made that possible by supporting us. If you want to be a Patreon, go to talkinginstations.com and find out how to support us there. For that other Thursday show, we're also looking to audition somebody who might be good for panelists there. So get in touch with me or January Valentine if you're interested in being on the show more regularly than just a guest. And I want to say thanks to everybody that showed up today. Tuzzy and Asher, thanks for coming in a little bit late. And,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, and Noros, who came earlier and had to take off. X and Fang and Dunk, thank you guys for jumping in and doing a great job. And am I missing anyone? Brisk, of course. Thanks, Brisk, for sticking it out. And Brisk Jr. there. All right, guys. Thanks very much, everyone. We will see you next week. That's all we have this week on Talking in Stations.